Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins, and welcome to Financial Lovemaking. This is where we talk about love, life, money, and everything in between, and how money can be used to build instead of destroy. And I've got my partner in New York City, S.T. Brown. She's a senior entertainment editor at Jet Magazine, or I want to say senior entertainment editor. Did I get your title exactly right, or did I get it wrong?
Entertainment director.
Entertainment director. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
It's okay.
I need to make sure I get the lady's title right.
Men don't always listen, ladies.
I guilty as charged, but I'm not guilty of not trying, and we have to just accept the idea that we're just a little bit less intelligent. I accepted that long ago, and I'm smart enough to know that I'm not as smart as I want to be all the time. So anyway, you're happy today. You're all smiling and giddy. You've been happy ever since we got on this. What's going on? What kind of happy juice you got over there in the office to you?
I'm just in a good mood today. I don't know if it's because I slept a little late last night, or I should say late this morning, went to sleep a little early tonight. It's a nice day in New York. It's 60 degrees. The sun is shining. But I'm happy, So I'm excited. I mean, and also I should say, maybe I'm living vicariously a little bit through our topic today, which is Kandi Burruss finally tying the knot, clink, clink, with Todd Tucker. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, Kandi's a singer, and she's also a star on Real Housewives of Atlanta, which is a reality show on Bravo. Now, it's been a huge part of her storyline, relationship issues, and finally meeting someone. And then, unfortunately, her fiance being someone that her mother was vehemently against her marrying simply because he made less money than her. But after 2 years of dating, the couple got married earlier this week. And, they did sign a prenuptial agreement, which shows that not only is she in love, but she's also smart. So I think, it's a hooray for Black love all around today. So that might be supporting my good mood.
Okay, now I got to ask you a question. Okay, you define it as Black love, but I heard, again, I'm not a big watcher of Real Housewives, but I heard that there was a fight at the wedding between Todd Tucker and Mama Joyce. Maybe this was just for the ratings or whatever, but let me just tell you this. E-Online says that they got into a fight, and the fight was over the prenup. They claim that Todd Tucker refused to sign the prenup. Now, did you hear that he actually went ahead and did it, or did he hold out and say, I'm not signing this thing?
I heard that there were some issues around signing the prenuptial agreement. There's always rumors about what's in the body of that document. Only the couple truly knows, but there were some very specific monetary amounts that will be allocated depending on how long they were married. I think it was like $100,000 they were married for less than 5 years, and then $300,000 if it was more than 10. Also was very specific, allegedly, in the prenup that all properties that were Kandi's would remain hers and be willed to her daughter and not to Todd in the event that she passed away. Now, a prenuptial agreement, for those of you who don't know, is basically what folks sign before they get married to decide how they will divvy up assets in case there is a divorce. And they're not only something that is of service to people who are wealthy, it's also of service to people who are working class, because there are assets that you have: homes, savings accounts, pensions, 401ks that really will decide how you live the rest of your life. So I'm very much for prenuptial agreements. It's just, how do you come to a place where both parties are pleased in what's in the document? And that seems to have been a challenge for Kandi and Todd. That was the case even during last season of the show. They talked about it. What do you think, boys?
Well, let me tell you this. First of all, just starting with Kandi and Todd, I don't know if it's completely confirmed that they actually signed the prenup. Let me tell you what E-Online says. E-Online says that Kandi married Todd this weekend, and Mama Joyce is not happy about it. Surprise, surprise, right? That probably feeds into the ratings of the show too. But they said their source tells them that Joyce and Kandi got into a fight just before the wedding. Joyce is upset that Todd would not sign or would not agree to sign the prenup. The couple got married without one, which led Joyce to believe her suspicions all along. He just wants Kandi for her money. Now, that's a quote from E-Online, from their source, whoever that person is. I guess this is Kandi. The source will be Deep Throat, like they used to have in the Watergate thing.
No pun intended, because she does have a sex line. Well, then we really need to go to the true sources, who are Kandi and Todd, to find out whether or not the prenuptial agreement was signed. And I'll definitely do that and get back with you and our audience at a later time, because Kandi was a person who I interviewed a few weeks ago for Jet Magazine, and she talked about getting married. And she also talked very vehemently about understanding the importance of having a prenuptial agreement. So I would be very shocked if she decided to concede, at the 11th hour, so the wedding could go forward. But people have done stranger things for love. So sometimes these secret sources, now, I also worked at a tabloid in the past. Sometimes these secret sources have the lowdown.
Well, I'm what I'm trying to talk about here, and we're going back to financial lovemaking now. We're not just here to talk about Kandi and Todd per se. We use that as a prototype, as an example that we can learn from. I would say that the question to me is, what if she did? What if she dropped the prenup? What if she just said, you know what? I love this man. He's my soulmate. We are meant to be together. I love him so much that, any amount of money is okay to risk in order to be with this person. We see men do this for, thousands of times, for probably thousands of years. Why is it suddenly just so sinister, so problematic for a woman to do that? Why would, I wonder if Mama Joyce, for example, and anybody else who agrees and says, oh no, he wants her money, she needs to protect all of her money, etc., which might make logical sense, but why would she behave that way in this case? I wonder if Kandi were a man, and it were reversed, and it was a man putting his wealth on the line for a woman, if we would look at that differently. What do you think, Tia?
I actually concede to that point, and we don't always agree, but I do think that there is a double standard about men being the providers versus women being the providers. So I think if Kandi were a man and people were saying like, oh, you should have a prenup, and his wife was saying, no, I didn't want one, people wouldn't look down on it. There is something to be said for a woman being the primary breadwinner and a man being able to make it on his own regardless of how long he was in a relationship, and being able to pull himself up by his own bootstraps. Now, that's one of the few double standards that actually don't work out in a man's favor. And one of the other things that we should be mindful of is that in most states at this point, and I'm not a legal expert, but I do know some general things, often property that you've acquired prior to marriage is still yours. So while there will be, some things that you have to divvy up in the event of a divorce, a lot of things that you acquired prior to the marriage will still be yours. Now, you might be obligated to maintain a certain standard of living, but it won't be everything. So, do I believe in true love? Yes. And do I think that you should not always go into a marriage thinking about the end? No, I don't. But I do think you have to protect yourself. And that protection might not look like a prenup. For some people, it may be making sure you have something separated before you actually go into the marriage so that you always have some security.
Well, I've heard people say, why should I get a prenup? That's like saying that, we're planning on getting a divorce. And I don't agree with that. I don't think a prenup means that you're planning to get a divorce. A prenup is, in my opinion, an insurance policy to say, just in case we're like the 50% of all other, deep, madly in love people who decide to end the relationship for whatever reason. Just in case we end up in that pile, we're clear about how things are going to be divided. And I think it actually makes sense to have a prenup. I just think that, you can imagine lots of scenarios where people see your lack of willingness or better yet, your willingness to go into a marriage without a prenup. They see that as a test of your love. How much do you love me? How much do you trust me? How much do you trust this relationship? If you want a prenup, then you are inherently saying that I am skeptical. I have some issues here. And you're also saying, look, I love you a whole lot right now, but in the event that we're not together, I'm not going to love you that much. I'm not going to love you.
But we know,
right. Are we not saying? But are we not saying that?
But we do know that.
Oh, go ahead.
So it's such a challenging thing, because when you're in a marriage, you're not making decisions based on thinking that you're heading to divorce. So that's the really weird thing about a prenuptial agreement. A prenuptial says that in case we divorce, before we get married, I want to set some things aside. But when you're actually in the marriage, the compromises you made are not based on saying that we're going to go separate ways. So what I mean by that is, and often it's women, so I'm going to say a little biased. You may not take certain jobs, or you may not do certain things financially. And I shouldn't say that, because men do this too, because you do what's the best for the team. So I do think if you decide not to have a prenuptial agreement, you still have to make some type of provision in case things fall apart. People always talk about the 50% of people of marriages that don't work, but 50% do. So it might not happen, but you always want to have the security of knowing that in case something happens, I will be okay. So whatever that looks like for you, that's my parting word. Whatever that looks like for you, you need to make sure that happens. If it's a prenuptial agreement, if it's a secret account, if it's, making sure that you have some property and assets before you get married that will always just be yours, and that you don't use community property to deal with, whatever it takes.
Well, I think that you make a good point. I think that obviously, the situation is in the eye of the beholder, right? Does a prenup work or doesn't it work? Well, it certainly depends. It goes back to when you and I talked about it in the book about master masturbation. That was a chapter that title that we came up with. I thought it was so creative. And effectively what it's saying is that you want to understand your own relationship with money and what trade-offs you're willing to make in order to earn money, to protect money, etc. And I would say that in a marriage, your desire to have a prenup is a very unique thing. What some people are like, look, I don't care who you are. I don't care how much I love you. I'm not going into anything without a prenup. And if that's who you are, then you probably have to fit a partner who fits who you are, right? Just the same way if you're frugal, you want a partner who can connect to your frugality in a way that makes you comfortable. I think that obviously, it's an individual choice, but at the same time, I think that, when you're talking about laying out, all these things, it's one thing that I think is so interesting to hear to you. And this is, I think, a Mars Venus issue, is that when you talk about all these things that a woman like a Kandi would use to protect her wealth, like you mentioned, prenups, secret bank accounts, investments offshore, whatever sinister thing she's doing to protect her wealth. Right, that's fine. And I don't disagree with that, right? But number one, first thing I'll say is that, when men have done these things historically, I think they've been perceived as being less than ethical, right? So I don't think they're any more ethical just because they're being done by a woman, first of all. Second of all, when you talk about this idea of sort of having this extra stuff in case your partner doesn't give you what you want, this stuff on the side, this secret stuff, these little hidden cubby holes of pleasure, security, whatever it is you're looking for, that allow you to escape the marriage, to supplement the marriage. I think that really goes into a mistress-like mentality that men have had. A lot of men, I've seen men who say, my wife is great, but she's not the best in the bedroom, so I keep my mistress just in case my wife doesn't give me what I want. Or I have something on the side just in case my wife abandons me and doesn't give me what I want, in the relationship or sexually, or she just leaves me, right? I have this stuff on the side, this extra security. Why is that any different? Why is that different when a Kandi Burruss does it versus when, some wealthy guy does it, has the mistress and the offshore accounts and the prenup and everything else? Does it look different when it's done by a man versus when it's done by a woman? What do you think about that?
No, and I don't think that everything can be equated. I don't think looking for fulfillment sexually and financially in a relationship are the same. That's number one. And number two, what I'm talking about isn't saying, hey, I don't think that you should give your all to any relationship, because I don't believe that. I do think that you have to be in 100%. But I also think you always have to think about your own security. And that will look different for different people. Now, I'm not saying you need to sacrifice the financial fidelity of your household by putting money on the side, but you do have to be mindful that at the end of the day, if you don't make good financial decisions for yourself and leave that totally in someone else's hand, you can end up eating cat food as a senior citizen. And that's just a reality. That's very different than getting blowjobs on the side. Now,
I know some guys who would eat cat food for a good blowjob, but that was a bit of a racist statement. But hey, we keep it real here. We're just gonna keep it real. But please continue. So I definitely think it's interesting that men, and I don't want to say all men, but because you are a man and you made this statement, you're equating money and sex. But women really think about money as security, and we don't look at sex as security. So it's very interesting how the different minds of thoughts are. For me, when I encourage anyone, and this is across genders,
when you think about happiness, I don't think you can just look at it on the basis of being a couple. You have to look at your own happiness, your own security, and you bring that into the relationship. So sometimes a person can't meet you 100% there. That doesn't mean that they can't be a viable partner, but you always have to think about, at the end of the day, I am responsible for me. And again, I'm not encouraging anyone to squirrel away money to the extent that it's to the detriment of their marriage or relationship. But you always have to be mindful. If you put you absolute control corrupts. Absolutely. I would never give my future 100% to anyone. And I wouldn't suggest that you as a man do that either. And men don't.
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. I've seen so many disasters from people, usually women, unfortunately, that have given way too much financial trust to someone else, and it didn't work out. I mean, you go back 20, 30 years, you had women or men that would get to the age of 45, have a midlife crisis, and run off with their 22-year-old secretary. I literally have seen a bunch of cases like this. It's not just a stereotype. And so I agree. Everyone should protect themselves no matter who they are. I think also one interesting point you made that I wanted to mention very quickly is you mentioned how men might equate money and sex and women equate money and security, and I agree. I mean, I think that there are. I remember the comedian Chris Rock actually made a really funny statement that was somewhat profound, where he said that everything a man does his whole life, every accomplishment he makes, is pretty much so he can get more sex. Right? He said it in his own way, but you get the point. And it's funny. I mean, there are men. Think about this. I mean, when you look at who spends the most money paying for sex, usually it's men. Don't get me wrong. There are women who do the same thing, but the sex trade industry is built off of these men that are willing to give up everything for sex, and then not just for sex, but maybe for love and companionship in addition to the sex, right? So for these men, so I think that analogy about sort of having something that secures the thing that you value the most, I think that the mistress analogy fits the side bank account analogy, right? A woman might need, and again, we're generalizing here, but I think we know many of these generalities hold true. A woman might say, I really need my money. Like I need my man, but I need my money almost as much or maybe more than I need him. Well, I think that you have men that might say, look, I want to have a healthy sex life. That's what I want. I'll give up all my money to do that, or whatever, right? So maybe again, that mistress mentality, like, look, I'm going to, and I've talked to guys about this, why do you have the mistress? Do you love your wife? A lot of people think, well, if you have a mistress on the side, you must hate the woman that you're with, or better yet, you really don't love her, or you really don't care about your marriage. And I see a lot of guys who are deeply devoted to their marriage. You look at Elliot Spitzer, sorry, that's my phone. You look at Elliot Spitzer, the former New York Attorney General, happily married, wouldn't leave his wife for $1 million, was a stable family man, but he consistently sought out the attention of these mistresses because there was something extra that he wanted in the world that he couldn't necessarily get at home. It doesn't mean his wife was keeping it from him. It just means maybe she couldn't even give that to him, right? So I think ultimately maybe that's how we have to think about a lot of these things. I'm not necessarily condoning one approach or the other, but I think being honest about human needs, how people fulfill those needs, how you fulfill your own needs, I think that's a better conversation than pretending that people don't have needs, whatever those needs may be, financial, sexual, or otherwise. But I certainly think, I'll conclude on that point, I certainly think there's a difference between how men and women see the impact of money on their relationship. I've heard hundreds of women talk about money and the way a man handled the money as badly as they would discuss him cheating on her. Like the whole conversation would have nothing to do with cheating or what he was doing with his penis on the side. They didn't care about that all the time. It was like, let me tell you how he ruined my money, right? And I just found that to be so fascinating. In fact, that was why I wrote Financial Lovemaking.
And when you say, let me tell you how he ruined my money, what she really is saying is, let me tell you how he ruined my peace of mind and security. So while I will not get on your bandwagon in terms of the mistress money analogy, I will say that if we're going to end this segment with vilifying both equally, then I'll say that there is a reason to cheat financially. And that is when you do not feel like your needs are being met and you do not feel secure. Now, I don't necessarily think it has to be a mistress, though. It could be a one-night stand. Put a little something away and let it grow. you don't have to touch it all the time, and that's my final stance on it.
So headline, S. Tia Brown condones cheating. See, I'm going to hold that over your head. I'm kidding. I
think it'll be interesting to have the listeners tell us what they think. So thank you for checking out this segment of Financial Lovemaking. You know that Boyce and I do not always agree, and this is one of those instances. Please hit us up and tell us what you think about this topic. Until next time, have a great day.
Bye-bye.